Welcome back to In the Ballpark, and it is absolute thrill and a privilege to have your company today. And it's hard to believe that it has been nearly an entire year since we have recorded an episode, but we are on the eve of the 2021 Finals Series, and it is fair to say, Maxy and Frisey, we have made it through most of the part of season 2021. But again, so many thrills, so many unexpected results, and here we are in one of the most exciting final series.
I don't even know where to start. Hasn't that? Can you believe we had a final series last year that started in October? Now here we are with one starting in August. Now I don't want to make the entire show this week about the Dons, but I know that's going to be hard for the three of us to manage. But who knows? You mentioned Serps. It's probably 200 to 300 odd days since our last chat. Well, the 6,000 days is the big talking point, isn't it? But I'm sure we'll cover that off. Gents, it is a thrill to be back, and looks like 4 cracking games ahead of us this weekend.
There's a lot going on, isn't there, Seb? Since the last time we spoke, I think as the Bombers, we were the laughing stock of the competition, and all of a sudden, it's Carlton's turn. And with today, I think it was probably the least shocking coaching sacking of probably one of the ones that I can remember at least. But yeah, a lot's changed since last time we spoke.
And Maxy and Frisey, I'm pretty sure, and not to bring politics into it, but was Donald Trump still the president of the United States last time we recorded In the Ballpark?
I think a lot of things have changed since the last time we spoke.
Unfortunately, COVID is still around, and hence why, gentlemen, we are having 2 finals in Tasmania. Now, Tasmania still don't have an AFL team, but they look a little bit closer to getting one. But how strange is it that potentially Essendon could win their first final since 2004, 6,000 however many days you said, Frisey, and it won't even be in Victoria. It'll be in Tasmania. Guys, I know it sounds a bit selfish, but you almost want us to be there to see it, but it's a bloody long swim.
You do. You certainly do, Serps. We've seen that many losing ones. We've become accustomed to it. I've got to say, I do feel that. It's almost the great irony of being a Bombers supporter in the last decade or so that it's now come down to this. But come on, gents, this is it. It's going to end. It's got to end. I can just, it has that feeling in the air. Now that I've said that, watch it all turn very ugly. I must say as well, gents, it is, and as we know, and I'm sure the entire football world knows, I mean, there's a Facebook and a Twitter page for it, for goodness sake. 2004, as you mentioned, I just want to shout out, it is a huge week, to slightly go off topic, a huge week for Australian Test captain Tim Payne, his beloved team, playing a final in his home state. I mean, the last time that, of course, the Dons won one, the guy hadn't even played a first-class game of cricket. I mean, for goodness sake, the iPhone hadn't even been invented. So there you go. Again, as I said at the top, I'd hate for us to consume this all with Essendon-related content, but gee, it's sort of hard not to, isn't it? It is an enormous weekend.
I saw there's it was like, do you know those last 2-minute clips at the AFL posts? They uploaded one of those of the Demons game that we won today, and there was on the outside of the boundary advertising, there was Crazy Johns, and I was like, Jesus Christ, it is a long time.
I mean, you can't help but look into what was happening in 2004. I did some Googling today, and Orlando Bloom, Paris Hilton, they're all on top of the charts, like in popularity. And, a lot has changed. It's unbelievable. And, watching back that game as well, David Hill was playing, and he had a nice set of hair too. So pretty unbelievable stuff.
That's right.
Hoity, Hurdy all running around as well, Frisey.
That's right. Look, to illustrate it even more, gents, even though it's already well known, but it was pre the renovation works getting done at the MCG, I think, which even just the thought of that is astounding. Here we are, three guys in our mid-20s that were probably 7 or 8 years old at that point. So there you go.
I've got to say, gents, as well about the Bombers this season, 2-6 looking pretty shaky. Game plan maybe not quite there, and it's an enormous turnaround from where we were last season, where there was nearly a mass exodus happening. And I think a lot of us had our hearts in our mouth this season about the re-signing of several key Bombers, including Zach Merritt, who has been touted as a captain on multiple occasions for the club. And despite all of the confusion and all the craziness that was 2020 for the Bombers, and a lot of people expected us to finish bottom 4, it's incredible that with one game to go in round 23, there we are already securing our final spot due to St Kilda beating Fremantle. So going into that final game against Collingwood, we didn't necessarily have to win it. And a lot of times we've had to come from behind in a lot of our seasons. 2019 is a good example of it, a recent example of it. This season, I tell you what, we really got it right in the second half of the season, didn't we, gents?
It feels like to me that the last few times that we've played finals, it's been that we've just limped into finals. Whereas throughout this entire year, but recently as well, it sort of felt like this is a different Essendon. I know we've obviously got a new coach, but it sort of feels like a different culture amongst the players as well. And like we usually get nervous, and I'm sure I'll be nervous on the day, but I'm actually looking forward to playing the Bulldogs, and I'm sure some of that is because we beat them only a few weeks ago, and you know whether or not playing in Tasmania will have an impact. And I'm sure the Bulldogs aren't going to play as poorly as what they did. And I think it was the third quarter where they had probably 5 or 6 shots where they should have really kicked them. Like there was a patch of like 5 minutes in that third quarter going into 3-quarter time where there was probably, I think Josh Bruce missed like 2 or 3 goals from like 5 meters out. So I'm sure we won't get, and Peter Wright kicked 7 goals, which is, as much as I love him, I don't think he'll kick 7 goals this week, but we're going into form and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're going in with form. That's spot on, Maxy. It's something that we I think as Essendon fans, it's become rare, I guess, heading into you look back at those rather bizarre and sometimes really ugly elimination finals that the Bombers have had. It's been 5 in a row where they've been on the wrong side of those. And think on almost every occasion, as you mentioned, they've sort of limped into the finals somehow. Form not great, really unconvincing, and most of the time they've met an opponent that's quite the opposite. Whereas this time heading in, it's almost as though the Bombers have got the form on their side, and really with I dare say less to lose. It's a little bit of a free hit this game. It feels like from an Essendon perspective. I can't recall exactly, lads, but I think that that final show or two last year when the 2021 predictions came out, I recall Essendon were anywhere between probably 10th and 14th, I think, between us here. So the mere thought of them making the 8 then was unheard of completely.
And I'll also touch on what Maxy was just saying before about going into the finals in really good form. And to be honest, I was more nervous last week about us missing finals than this week being in the finals. I love the build up to the finals. You buy any kind of newspaper and they've got all the different clubs, full portrait pictures of the entire team. And regardless of the result, absolutely, there's just more of a sense of just being proud and being ahead of probably where a lot of people predicted us to be, and probably where I predicted us to be as well. It's an extraordinary effort. And I just think that, I was more nervous about getting knocked out by Collingwood last week. And now that I'm here in the finals, it's like, you're absolutely right, Frisey. It is a free hit. There is really nothing to lose. And I think it was fantastic that this season as well, there's just been so many defining moments for the club where you could almost put your finger on it and say that was the turning point. And to have multiple turning points in one season, it does make you proud to be a supporter again. Guys, did any stand out for you as the sort of the turning point moment in season 2021 for the Dons?
I think do you remember that Port Adelaide game? I think it was round 2. We've just come off losing to Hawthorn by a point after we had that insane, I think it was the second quarter of round 1, where I think we kicked something crazy like 10 goals or something. And then the very next quarter, Hawthorn kicked like 8 goals in a row or something. And we just thought, we thought it was a new Essendon, but just in that 30 minutes where Hawthorn kicked all those goals, we just thought this is the exact same Essendon. And then the next week we go over to Port Adelaide, we get thumped. I can't even remember. It must have been 10 goals or something. And Jai Caldwell does his hamstring or something, and Dylan Shield gets injured. Sam Draper also gets injured, and you just think, Jesus Christ, we're in for a terrible year. And the very next week, we end up beating St Kilda, but I think it was like 75 points. And you think, gee, something's going on here. So that's the one that stands out to me. But I know you said you were nervous about losing to Collingwood and Gold Coast. But when you think about our backline this season, it's if I told you last year that our backline was going to be Jaden Laverty, Jimmy Stewart, and Nick Hind, like you wouldn't have picked it. But going into the last 2 weeks, like you've got trust in our backline, and actually wasn't that nervous because I looked at the Collingwood team and I looked at the Gold Coast team, and you just think these teams aren't going to be able to score against us. I think we kept Collingwood to 60 points and Gold Coast to, 40 points or 50 points. It's just like, this isn't a fluky Essendon team like we were under John Westphal. There's actually a team built on a fair bit of substance. So, yeah, I think, and it's built ever from that St Kilda game. I know we lost games after that, but ever since that St Kilda game, you just thought, no, this actually is a different team to the one that was coached under John Westphal.
To pinpoint games, that was definitely one. I think that mid-season sort of come from behind win over in the West to take down the Eagles, I thought that was pretty impressive. It seemed like that one really just brought the whole group of them together and perhaps increased the supporters' belief thereafter. Again, as you mentioned, there was that little mid-season sort of speed hump, if you like, they hit for a few weeks thereafter. But even that win, because obviously another little thing that sort of goes Essendon's way heading into the weekend, whether or not it has an effect on their state of mind, who knows? But they're obviously 1-from-1 down there in Tassie this year. That game where they just hung on to grind out that win over the Hawks. And even then, you sort of think, okay, not the strongest opposition at the moment, but it was sort of perhaps a 50-50 game that they're able to edge in front and win down there in front of it. Might I add, what was a hugely pro-Essendon crowd down there that Sunday. And you'd be hoping for much of the same this weekend. Again, still can't believe it, boys, that we've got a final series starting in August. All I'll say to that is the last time that even happened was 2000, funnily enough.
Unbelievable, Frisey. You have dug into the record books. Wow. Maxy, what you said about the backline is so true. And I think Devon Smith summarised it perfectly in his post-game interview in round 23. He said, it is a backline full of misfits. You know, most of these players were initially found in the forward line or found in very suspect positions on the field, thinking that's where they're meant to play. But, you know, you look back at their record and a lot of those players did play, you know, underage football in those positions. But it's taken until a coach like Truck to say, gee, you've got some real natural talent in those positions, play a role. And guess what? We're getting results. And I think it's a very role-playing driven club now. You know, it's no longer left down to the individual's brilliance. It's now left down to pretty much the whole side to play their role and see how well they can play. I mean, gosh, guys, you'd be struggling to think of the number one improver at Essendon. There's several, honestly, and you could make a case for all of them. Very strong cases for all of them. It's just been a great all-round performance for everyone, and 3 All-Australian squad selections as well for the Bombers, which we haven't had for quite a while, gents.
Yeah, I think the last time we had 3 would have been 2017 when we had that decent year. I think it was Danaher, Hurley, and Merrick from memory. But yeah, Jakey Stringer's obviously been in incredible form. He's probably the informed player of the competition, just about, considering I think Bont was probably up until that sort of period where Jakey Stringer took off, and I think it was that Hawthorn game that Fries was just mentioning where he kicked something. I think he kicked 4 or 5 goals, but he's just been consistent. Like everyone was saying. Before he signed that contract, that he'll get his contract and then he'll go to the old Jack. But there's just been no signs of that. And I can't wait for him to play his old side in an elimination final. And hopefully he can get the job done for us.
Oh, let's hope so. Because Frisey, I tell you what, the way he was playing against the Bulldogs and some of his deliveries outside of the centre was just unbelievable. Like, put it on an absolute platter for our forwards, Peter Wright included in that. I mean, you're absolutely right. He's the informed player. No Dustin Martin in this final series. The big question that's been asked all week is he Dustin Martin? Is he the next Dustin Martin? Is he the next big finals performer? Yes, we would have obviously liked to be in the top 4, so give him more chances to play. But at the same time, Ben Rutten has been at a club where he's seen Dustin Martin live and coached him. So clearly they've made a game style that is based around really strengthening what Jake Stringer can do and really pinpointing his brilliant things that he's able to do on the field. And Frisey, I've got to say, he is one of the most exciting players coming into the final series.
Well said, Seb. I tell you what, the remarkable, I suppose, improvement in consistency as well. There, it just adds another dimension to Essendon that sort of obviously wasn't there beforehand. And from an opponent perspective, you'd hate to come up against it in a final series as well. I know that 2016 feels like a long, long time ago. You think back 5 years, even then, he was pretty instrumental in that Bulldogs final series. It was only about his third or fourth season, I think, then. Certainly wasn't overawed one bit by the stage. So he's one of not many players in Essendon's camp that have sort of been there, done that when it comes to finals. So incredible. Just on that, I will say I think the optimism is certainly warranted from a Bombers perspective. I mean, hey, I'm no different. I do think, despite their really patchy, uncertain form coming in, the first half, especially of the season, showed us how electric the Bulldogs can be. I'm sure we'll see a different version of them come out this week, perhaps compared to, say, the last month or so.
Yeah, we definitely won't be taking them lightly, considering they pretty much were on the top of the ladder for the entire season. And it was just those last 3 to 4 rounds where they really started struggling and shot themselves in the foot ultimately. And again, the Bulldogs have an elimination final, which they would be sweating over hugely. So it's just makes their task to win another elusive premiership that little bit harder. We are going to get into the other results, gentlemen, because believe it or not, Essendon aren't the only team that are in the final series, but just finally on the Bombers, what for you guys has been one of the most unexpected things or unexpected players that you've seen from Essendon this year, other than just their incredible surge into the top 8?
I'll probably start with Jaden Laverty. I was struggling to think if he was going to get a game this season, especially playing in the back line. So he's probably, in terms of improvement, I think you could say Darcy Parish's ceiling is probably the most improved. But if you take players from, say, what they were out of 10, Darcy Parish is probably maybe a 6 or a 7, and he's gone to an 8 or a 9. Whereas Jaden Laverty was realistically, was probably a 3 or a 4, and he's gone to about a 7 or an 8. So I think he's actually, in terms of, if you'd say a relative rating, I think Jaden Laverty's actually probably improved more, even though Darcy Parish's ceiling is probably higher.
Yeah, he's well and truly saved his football career, Maxy. A lot of time there, just didn't really seem like he just felt really lost. And I think players, when they don't have roles, I mean, I just feel like the psychology behind them, they almost get injured easier. They just can never quite get themselves right. They don't have the confidence in their body. They don't have the confidence in their ability. But seeing what he's been able to do in the back line, Maxy, he's been playing, as you mentioned, on some of the best forwards in the comp. And he has been out-muscling them and outplaying them and outmarking them too, which is a huge credit to him. And he had an amazing Anzac Day as well. So many amazing games. That was the one that stood out for me.
I wholeheartedly agree that Laverty and Parish probably stand out. Big Sammy Draper as well, for one. I know he missed probably more footy than he played in the end, but he's taken to AFL level just seamlessly. And of course, the other one that we mentioned a little earlier in James Stewart. I mean, there's two guys there, being Laverty and Stewart, who sort of become the almost the cornerstone of that Essendon backline. Whereas 12 months ago, you're looking at two careers there that were completely at the crossroads. No idea how long potentially left, sort of thing. And look, I dare say as well, come at a particularly appropriate time with the Cale Hooker and Paddy Ambrose retirements. And if anything, that patched up backline has become ultra reliable. Now, you couldn't have imagined the turnaround.
Mason Redman's been outstanding as well. And considering that he was actually in the same draft as Parish and Francis. So that actually makes that draft look a lot better, considering both Parish and Redman have had outstanding years. And Francis in the last few weeks has actually looked pretty comfortable forward. Considering our backline, I thought it was sort of an interesting mix when he was actually playing in the backline, because I thought we had a lot of third tall defenders. I thought Ridley, Francis and Laverty are all size-wise, in my eyes, they're kind of third talls. Be interesting next year when Hurley and potentially Zach Reid do come back, what that backline mix actually looks like. But Redman as well has been another standout in terms of lifting his rating from last year.
And Maxy, the red dog, can't he kick a big ball from outside 60? Unbelievable.
He did it easy last week.
So sweet. Oh,
He hit that sweet. He did, like, it looked like it was just smooth. Like, he wasn't trying to kick it, 60 meters. It just did it smooth, and it sailed over like 5 meters across the line. Just quickly on the team. So in for the Bulldogs, Scott, West, and Gardner. So from memory, Gardner's a tall defender. I think that's right. And we've named Caldwell in the extended squad. I know that's Sunday team. So whether or not he'll play or not, who knows? But it'll be interesting to see if they potentially, because they've had Cox in the last few weeks as mini-sub, but they haven't used him. So I'm just wondering if they're going to put Caldwell at least in the squad, if they might choose to put him as the medical sub, or considering how flexible Cox is as a player. And I know he's played on the wing, but he could play anywhere. So just be interesting if they go with Cox as the medi-sub as they have the last few weeks, or they actually go with Caldwell.
Been a long time waiting there, but look, they've thrown him in for the heat of a final, so who knows if indeed he's in that starting lineup. Well, I'm sure you can bet your life he'll be ready. Interesting as well there, boys. Those team announcements do show us that there's no sign of a return for Donald Tipping-Woody, which is probably something we didn't want to see in a final. But look, that's okay. We've got to pick the best available for the week, totally. And I noticed as well, guys, that it looks as though the Bulldogs have not decided to go for Steph Martin either. Yes.
Lewis Young and Tim English will both be playing in the ruck. I think Sam Draper would just be licking his lips. He won't be getting too ahead of himself, but he'll be thinking, I think I'm going to have a fun day in Tasmania.
I'm sort of thinking whether they just go with Lewis Young in the middle and they'll play Tim English forward, which, to be fair, he actually looks like a half-decent forward to me. But, they've drafted him as a ruckman, and they've put a lot of time into him as a ruckman. So, yeah, Big Sammy's got a big job. And considering last time that we played, I think we kicked something crazy, like 10 goals from stoppages. So considering that they haven't picked Steph Martin, the Bulldogs are going to have a big job to stop us scoring out of the midfield.
Can I say, boys, is just going back to young Mace Redmond for a moment, is he going to tackle the life out of Bontempelli again this week? Because I tell you, if you thought it was intense 5 or 6 weeks ago, this is the first week of the finals. It's only going to be worse.
I feel sorry for him. That's one of the best tackles I've seen all year, and I love the aggressiveness. And they go, sorry, Mason, it's a little bit too aggressive. You're too much of a mongrel. You're no longer a red dog. You're a dingo.
Certainly. Guys, didn't Maxy Gawn withstand the pressure that was on the plate on Saturday night? I tell you what, can I ask, fellas, I don't know how much of it you may have seen either live or thereafter, but there was a potentially controversial, deliberate out of bounds, paid about 30 or 40 seconds before that ball went inside 50 to end up with Gawn. Not sure if you saw it, but it got me thinking, player was penalised for kicking forward in a really sort of scrappy situation. Not too sure about that. The one that I thought was just downright silliness from the Geelong player was a little bit after that, was just to proceed to punch the ball about 20 rows back into the stands, which actually resulted in the 50-metre penalty for the ball to end up with Gawn, which looking back, I can't recall a Cats player, I'm sorry, but the conversation with Chris Scott afterwards, I can only imagine the nature of that.
Would you have called that 50-metre penalty?
I don't know about that. Yeah, it was very, very tight, wasn't it? I think it's probably fair enough. I mean, it was really sort of clumsy from the Cats player to do that. It's not a great act for your team at the best of times, but to do it in that situation, goodness me, I wouldn't have been able to look Scotty in the eye after the game.
It was definitely there. It's definitely a 50-metre penalty, but sometimes umpires, swallow the whistle in that scenario in the last few minutes. And considering the importance of that game, whoever won was going to be the minor premier. So, yeah, the umpire definitely got it right, but a few umpires would have swallowed the whistle in that scenario.
I can only imagine what his teammates and his coach might have said to him afterwards. Even just sort of pulled him aside and said, young man, next time you might not want to do that.
It was definitely a brain fade. You could tell he was frustrated with Guthrie's kick, but come on, Brad Close, you got to be better than that, mate. While we're on the topic, gents, we are going to look at the road to glory, the road to the grand final. And the team that went down on Saturday night are one of the first teams that come up on Friday night against Port Adelaide. Guys, there is a sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a sense of deja vu here. Did these two teams play each other in the qualifying final last year at Adelaide Oval?
Yes, they did.
There you go. There you go.
It was that game that, do you remember, I think Tom Hawkins had like 4 or 5 set shots and he just kept on missing?
He did. That's the game. That is the game. And Stevie Motlop had a night out.
That's right, from memory. I would say, though, that when they played earlier in the year, from memory, I think Geelong won by, I think it was 3 or 4 goals, but Jeremy Cameron was actually playing directly on Aliir and he had a night out. So it'll be interesting to see if Port, what they do with Aliir, because if Jeremy Cameron plays on him again, then he could run right. So if I was Ken Hinkley, I'd be doing everything to make sure that Aliir is potentially playing on, someone not as dangerous as Jeremy Cameron, even if he plays them on one of the Geelong small forwards, as you see with other teams, like who put their good intercepting defender on one of the smalls or one of the forwards who plays higher up the field. So if I was Ken Hinkley, I'd be doing everything to make sure that Aliir is not playing on Jeremy Cameron.
They've got quite a finals history, really, these two teams, don't they? I can think of several just off the top, going back perhaps 15 or so years. Of course, none probably better known than that incredible 2007 grand final. But look, that aside, yes, it is extraordinary that we now have the corresponding game again. First up, the Friday night this time. Of course, another thing that we'll probably touch on at some point is that Bombers game, of course, happens to be a Sunday final, the first one of those in 7 years, I believe. So for perhaps the traditionalists among us, nice to see that back, you might say. This is one of, I would say, probably 4 potentially very close and very difficult games to pick, which is probably what you want to see. It's a good thing coming in to week 1. Just as a side here, boys, now of the top 4, if you've got to pick one of the top 4 that are perhaps your most likely candidate to bounce out in straight sets, perhaps, who is it? I almost want to say it is the Cats, but I bearing in mind what they're capable of, certainly don't want to brush them aside for a second either. But I do feel like with perhaps the list profile and where things are at, it's almost got to happen for them this year. Having said that, I feel like we almost say that about Geelong every year, don't we?
Yeah, you keep waiting for them to fall off, but they never do. Just quickly, so Port Adelaide have Fantasia in and Georgiades out. So I think he did his hamstring. And Geelong get Duncan back and Max Holmes goes out of the side. But I think Sean Higgins is going to play as the medical sub again. So interesting changes there.
Frisey, it's a great question that you pose. And I would like to say it's going to be Brisbane, because I am expecting Brisbane potentially to go down to Melbourne. And then if they come up against the Hot Dons, well, they might have a fight on their hands, Fries.
That scenario hadn't yet crossed my mind, but it's great that you've put that into perspective for us. It does appear that on more occasions than not, we end up with a top 4 team that, for whatever reason, doesn't go to plan and they end up out in week 2. I did read an interesting stat. I am fairly certain in reading this week that a team has never actually won it from 4th. So I don't know what that suggests about the Brisbane Lions, but it would appear 4th and 8th were the only positions where it hadn't been done. Everywhere else it had been achieved. Not sure what that means. Probably nothing.
The bogey number, Frisey, the bogey position on the ladder. The other one that I found was quite interesting is for the last 10 years, for all the teams to finish on top of the ladder, only one of those teams has converted their top finish into a premiership, and that was Hawthorn, I'm pretty sure, back in 2013.
I wonder if it has anything to do with the pre-finals bye, which has been scrapped for this season.
But gents, talking about Brisbane Lions, they come up against the Demons at the Adelaide Oval. It's the Demons' home game, and first and foremost, wouldn't it be great for Melbourne fans if they were able to watch? But particularly this last game, they've just found ways to win in parts of the game where you think, well, you almost need a timeout. You almost need a coach to get into these players' ears, but they're just so well coached. They're so mature. Their backline's so strong. And they've just got one of the best players in the comp being Max Gawn, who just again continues to monster anyone in his way. So they are the premiership favourite right now as we're speaking on this program. And, there's no reason why they can't win it. But they're going to have some stern opposition, aren't they, Frisey, against the Brisbane Lions?
Extraordinary. That was the strongest celebration for a 6-goal win I think you've ever seen. But there you go. All for good reason, though, as well, I must say. And that's why they're now here where they are this week. Yeah, look, difficult to go past Melbourne, though, for this one. I think for their best chance to maybe go all the way in such a long, long time. You got these long-suffering fans now. At the moment now, God, they're probably suffering more than just about any of the other teams, I think, by this point. And, the thought of the big day, the big occasion, not even being at the MCG with it, a lot of these things, fellas, you couldn't script them.
Playing against Melbourne and being an Essendon supporter, watching Joe play against Stephen May when Stephen May was playing for Gold Coast. Stephen May was probably one of the opponents that gave Joe the most trouble. But even watching that game earlier in the season when I think Joe struggled a bit against Stephen May. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Stephen May handles him. And as well as I'm sure you're going to see Jake Lever come over the top with that fist a lot of the time. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes this week. But I'm sure once Brisbane have got the double chance, so I'm sure he's going to have an effect at some stage.
Perhaps, a full season uninterrupted no doubt helps as well, but seems to be probably working harder than he ever has before. I mean, I do acknowledge those 16 and 2017 seasons he had for Essendon were pretty outstanding as well, but never really reached those levels again thereafter. I think straight away the signs were there that this boy loves the occasion and perhaps even lifts a level or two once he gets there. So no doubt that particularly if they can get themselves past week 2, would be quite a daunting task coming up against him, I would have thought, particularly when confidence levels are high, that's for sure.
He's a confidence player, so any team that comes up against him will have his hands full, but I'm sure Stephen May will remind him about the record that he has against him.
On that, guys, heading into to this weekend and Saturday's game, are they your tip heading in? Do you think it's potentially a very, very tricky one? I think this one.
Melbourne will be too good. Best team all year. I think they'll win.
I'm thinking the same, fellas. Yeah, hard to go against them at this point. Agree.
Yeah, that's 3 for Melbourne. I completely agree. I think they're going to ride that emotion from the weekend with Maxy Gawn. They would have been feeling good all week, but also very focused. So I think this is their game. This is their year. We are about to talk about GWS in their final, but GWS with pick 2 from Collingwood, and Collingwood are just going to scrape in, I think, with points to get Nick Dacos. Gee whiz, pick 2 to GWS, a team that's already got so much young talent. Gee, can they get any more?
Yeah, they struck gold there. It's sort of the danger that can come with trading future picks. But I think Collingwood tried to rationalise that by saying that I think they got 4 or 5 picks in the sort of teens, 20s and 30s last draft. And a few of their younger players have actually come on and to give some of our Collingwood fans some hope. I actually do like some of the look of their younger players this year. But, GWS have rotted them there with pick 2.
Flip side of that is you see just as many of them tend to walk out the door as those that come in.
Probably and go to Collingwood for Aussie.
That's right. It sort of appeared, Collingwood, Essendon and Carlton are kind of the destination clubs for giants that are on the way out. It's very unusual, isn't it?
It's hard to believe that Sydney absolutely came storming out of the gates and upset the reigning premiers, being Richmond. And the first team to beat the Sydney Swans when they were in incredible form was, in fact, the GWS Giants in the Battle of the Bridge. So clearly, gents, that rivalry continues. And this is the 3rd time, in fact, that they're playing in the finals against each other. So they are really starting to create an incredible rivalry.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, as you said, this is the 3rd time they're going to play a final against each other, and they've played twice this year already. I think the first time, as you said, GWS beat Sydney. It was that Josh Kelly goal, the left foot snap. And then The second game that played was that game where I think it was 2 or 3 players of each side got kicked out of the game in the hour before the game because they went to that rugby game in Melbourne. So they've had 2 interesting clashes just on the ins and outs. Sydney lose Callum Mills, and I think Robbie Fox is out, but he's might be the medical sub as well as Campbell, whereas GWS get Mumford and Toby Green back. So both sides have beaten each other. But the last 2 finals games they've played against each other, GWS has won both times. So considering that Sydney have both Mills and Josh Kennedy's out as well, I've got a sneaky feeling that the Giants are actually going to win this game.
Ooh, Maxy. Wow. That's a big tip, but you're absolutely right. Those ins do suggest that the Giants, well, whenever they have Shane Mumford, big mummify in their team, they seem to win more often than not. Fries, are you in agreement with Maxy here?
They can get this done. It's not with a great deal of certainty about the tip, but they're my pick just in probably a close contest. Fully expecting 4 close games this week, in truth, if I look at it on the surface. But having said that, we know that doesn't always go the way, and this should be a ripper. I did see a couple of pieces during the week mentioning that Mummy is taking no prisoners this weekend. He's intending to go out with a bang, more or less, I think, as he so often does. We know the way that he plays, and I do think it lifts the confidence of that side. There's no doubt. You just imagine, yourself being on that guy's team. You'd probably walk a bit taller, I would have thought. So their absolute best this year has looked fantastic, and probably slightly above even the best footy that the Swans have played. Although, having said that, they did have that unbelievable first half of the year in particular. Gee, this one is tricky, but yeah, Giants for mine as well. Just
the big forward debate in this game is obviously going to be very interesting. But gents, I couldn't believe that this final coming up is going to be Jesse Hogan's first ever final. He's had so much luck not go his way, and obviously a lot of that is attributed to himself as well, making some pretty awful decisions at parts of his career. But he's at his 3rd club now, gents. He was practically the number 1 pick back in the day, and here he is playing in GWS Giants colours in a state where he's not originally from. Here he is playing in his first ever final. It's pretty unbelievable. And then at the other end of the ground, gents, we've got a guy who's getting very close to 1,000 goals, and Gillon McLaughlin has came out saying, no, we don't want anyone running onto the field. Well, I tell you what, COVID protocols are going to get broken if Buddy kicks 1,000. Who's winning out of these 2 key forwards in this game, gents?
Sam Taylor actually has a pretty good record on Buddy in the last time they played. So I'm looking forward to seeing that battle. But as you said, Hogan, his first final, he's been at the wrong clubs at the wrong time. I don't think he was at Melbourne in 2018 when they played that final series. He would have been in Fremantle that time. So generally, throughout his career, he's been at the wrong place at the wrong time until now, where I think he actually made a pretty good decision going to the Giants because he's not in a football-centric state, and he's away from some of the bad influences that he might have been around in his time in Perth. So I know he's had his injuries this season, but I think he's actually made the right decision going to GWS. But who knows which one of them is going to perform better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Maxy. Sam Taylor, he has won those battles against Buddy in recent times, and he's been one of the most outstanding emerging stars coming out of this season. I mean, obviously, he played in that grand final, but he's just went to new heights with his game, and he is a very exciting prospect. And the rest of their backline as well has been pretty impressive too. They just look like a really well-coached group.
Who are you tipping?
Oh, Jesus, you had to ask me. Oh, gosh. I'm going to actually tip Sydney in this one. I'm going to tip them by a couple of goals. But I do completely agree with your arguments there, though. I think GWS are coming into this game with a lot of good form.
I'm sort of just picturing in my head the last few times that they've played finals. They've been pretty aggressive clashes from the Giants. I think they sort of live off that. And I can also picture a few times, I think it was that Collingwood preliminary final, that last quarter, the Giants' backline just seems to hold up like when they're under pressure. I think do you guys remember that preliminary final where Collingwood had all the play in the last 5 minutes, but they just couldn't score? They couldn't get through that Giants backline. So, yeah, that's the reason why I've tipped them.
They were just resisting everything that night when Collingwood were coming back with the crowd behind them, throwing everything at them. It's interesting you mention young Taylor as well. He's probably the prospect of somehow finding 8 goals in the one match this weekend. Not that he's incapable of it. We know he's not, but that's probably almost squashed his chances of that having to play on such an opponent.
Now, we have spoken a lot about the Essendon game, but we are yet to actually get a tip on it.
I'm the most confident I've ever been going into an Essendon elimination final. I think we're actually in better form, so I'm tipping the Bombers. I know I'm definitely biased in that in this game, but I think we're going to win.
I love it. Often I'd say that the head and the heart perhaps are telling me two different things. No, I'm tipping the Bombers, and not just because it's obviously the result that personally I'd love to see. I do think that the form is there. I know it's not for the Dogs, as we touched on, but that won't take much for them to find a bit of that spark either. I just think, a few little factors just seem to be tipping Essendon's way slightly. It's just got this, a bit like that lovely sensation and the smell of the springtime cut grass. It's just got this feel in the air. Unfortunately, don't ask me exactly what it is because I couldn't explain it to you. But it's just a gut feel, nothing more. So, another one for the Dons.
Gents, I'm going to have to agree with you on that one. I've got to say the way that we played against Collingwood was a telling sign that, we weren't going to over-celebrate the fact that we've just made it into a finals and that we're fully content with that. It looks like we're not content with that. It looks like we want to go further. We want to create a new history. From all reports, Ben Rutten is all about the history of the Bombers, and he's all about creating his own history. There is a huge sense of a legacy involved, not only for him but for this playing group. And this week, remarkably, I've been pretty relaxed. Like you guys said, there is something in the air, Frisey. Regardless of the result, I'm just really proud that we got there, gents.
So we're all tipping the Bombers, so we're setting ourselves up for heartbreak. Let's hope for the best. What about the Port Adelaide versus Geelong game, sir? Who are you tipping?
Yeah, I've got a good feeling that Port Adelaide might get this one right. So I'm going to tip Port Adelaide in this one, gents.
I'm with you, mate. I think Port Adelaide will be too good at home with the crowd there as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a big factor, and apparently dry conditions as well, which I think will suit Port Adelaide.
I think 3 out of 3 actually for mine. So Port as well. I know they've copped plenty, haven't they, for that, for their record against the fellow top 8 teams. But I do agree that the home crowd factor is always a part. I may have had a different outlook on this game if it was somewhere else, perhaps MCG or down at Geelong, although the issue of finals down there, we won't even bring that up. It's a sensitive topic, so probably best left alone. Don't want to write off the Cats because, as I sort of touched on earlier, they have a habit of proving you wrong and fighting back when you don't expect them to. But as far as tomorrow night goes, I'm leaning towards Port, definitely.
And Maxy, quick tip from you, is Tom Hawkins going to have his kicking boots on?
I think he will. I think he would have learned from last time playing there. Hopefully he's realised where to start the ball with his famous left to right slider, as BT likes to call it. So, I think he'll, hopefully, for Tom's sake, he'll be playing his 300th game on the weekend. So, time flies, doesn't it? Yeah, I think Port Adelaide would be too good.
With that in mind, essentially we are tipping a Brisbane Essendon semi-final. And that also means with the 2 GWS 1 Sydney tip, that means we are looking at a GWS Geelong semi-final. That's a pretty good second week, gents.
Possibilities for Bomber fans if they happen to win that as well against Joe. But of course, it's a gamble, and I'm sure Essendon fans would like to see nothing less than Danaher strolling to victory against them in a final. Boys, I'm just going to throw this out there. It's likely to be incorrect regardless. I almost don't care. The gloves are off. I'm just going to stick it out there. This week for our Bombers is probably the hardest task in terms of perhaps mentally and whatnot and everything that they've got to overcome to get through week 1. If they do, in fact, do that, they get through week 1, I'm getting a sense of a 2016 style.
The lid's off.
Yeah. I can't believe I've just said it. I almost want to take it back.
Wouldn't it be ironic if we were to dethrone them first and then go on that remarkable run? It would just be extraordinary, led by Jakey Stringer. Wow.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. We can only dream, gents. But I'm really excited for this weekend of footy. It's going to be great. How good is it to have the finals here, gents? Can't believe it's been nearly an entire year since we last filmed in the ballpark, but it's always a joy. It's always a privilege, gents, to have you here talking footy. It's been an absolute joy as always, gents. Thanks for joining me in the ballpark today.
Always a pleasure, Sep.
So, Maxy, brilliant. Thank you, lads. Enjoy your weekend of footy. Only 9 games to go, so let's cherish them. 4 of them coming up this week. Hopefully 4 rippers. Thanks again.
Can't wait to see you next week when we talk more about the finals, and let's hope our Bombers are still there. Go the Bombers. See you next time on In the Ballpark.